We're going to hear about nuclear advocacy from our three panelists for a little over half of our time, about an hour. And then we're actually going to break into groups at your table, and you all are going to practice being nuclear advocates. So we've got an activity that's going to require Slido. Hopefully you all have your phones and get on that Slido app for us. So let me introduce our three panelists, and then we'll get into our session. Paris ORTIZ-WINES, she is the Global Director of Stand Up for Nuclear. Paris has spearheaded in-person demonstrations and has led nuclear advocacy and social media campaigns around the world. Eric MEYER is on the far side over there. He is the Executive Director of Generation Atomic. Eric has organized marches, rallies, and advocacy training across North America and Europe. And Allison Smith here in the middle. Allison is an associate consultant with Nuclear Matters. Allison is based in Washington, D.C. and specializes in energy, public affairs, and media. So with that, let's get into our first question. Allison, we'll start with you. What is nuclear advocacy and why is it important?
I've been thinking a lot about this after ISODOPE, and there's no way I can capture it as beautifully as she did. I think nuclear advocacy is just having the conversation. For me, I hadn't uttered the words nuclear energy until about 2 years ago. I'm from a small town, North Carolina. I now live in DC, but it wasn't a part of my everyday conversation. And I think one day I had, dare I say, a light bulb moment, pun intended, where I was very much like, this is important to every aspect of our lives. Nuclear energy can be tied to every component of us taking a walk down the street, having a conversation with a friend, and what that means for how we think about energy and where we get it from. So for me, advocacy is as simple as what we're doing right now. And you'll hear me say this multiple times, but I encourage you all to really view yourselves as advocates, because being in this room among the brightest and the best and having these conversations, it's a form of advocacy. And we can get a little bit more into what that looks like. But for me, it's opening the door. It's learning, it's growing, and it's realizing that there's so much to continue to learn in these conversations.
Awesome. Paris?
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I got started in this space. I studied environmental studies, so nuclear energy was not something that we were taught. And so when I did have my light bulb moment, I knew that like any other, whether it's a political or social movement, whether it's for women's rights or let's say civil rights, being an advocate can take many shapes and forms. It doesn't have to be the typical activist that's going out and marching. It could be as simple as we said, over dinner, over cocktails, drop the word nuclear, see how people react. It doesn't have to be this big thing where you have to put yourself out there, but I think in small moments, we can definitely bring up nuclear energy because energy is life. Energy is all around us. It allows us to build societies. And as ISODOPE mentioned, we want people to thrive. And nuclear continues to be the underdog. So our voices are that much more important. And many times when people come up to me, they're like, oh, I've never heard people talk about nuclear energy. Oh, nuclear energy is good? Like, yes, girl, it's good. So you never know. Every person is an opportunity. So there's many things that we can do, and there's a range.
And Eric?
Yeah. I think the most important part of this question is the why of nuclear advocacy. And it comes down to what kind of world do we want to pass down to future generations? Do we want to pass down a world that's warmer, it has less predictable sources of energy, that pollute more, that cost more, or do we want to pass a world down where we have reliable, clean power for generations far into the future that doesn't hurt the environment? That's the kind of legacy that everybody in this room is working to day in, day out as a part of your job. And maybe because we know how important nuclear energy is and how much potential it has over the next few decades, that can really drive the passion that we need to advocate effectively. And there are, like my friends here mentioned, many different ways to do that, whether it's, talking to your neighbor or somebody at your church, or to teachers, to journalists, to policymakers. and communicating with them one-to-one or through letters or through social media, video, photos, memes, whatever it is. There's a million different ways, and we're probably good at different, or they're better at some than others. And part of nuclear advocacy is one, remembering why it's so important and internalizing that, and then kind of finding what your advocacy superpowers are, and making a commitment to take action and do something.
All right, so we covered what and why. So now that that's established, what is the current landscape for nuclear abroad? Are people generally supportive? Are they fighting against it? Or do they really just not know much about it? Paris, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll just say that, in the past 2 years, we've seen, right, with the global energy crisis, I would say places and countries that aren't used to remembering what it's like to go without power have really had a rough wake-up call. And what we've seen in Europe for them scrambling to get energy, let alone clean energy. So nuclear has been revealed as the unsung hero. I know that we all have known what nuclear's value is and what it brings to the table. But so I put on this slide, you can see various countries. These are polls from the past year and a half of public opinion towards nuclear. And we're finding that, especially in East European countries that still know why energy is sexy, which is it's serving energy reliability, energy security, energy sovereignty. So we've seen that in Estonia, Czech Republic, they're pro-nuclear, they're continuing to go. But in these ones, we're seeing like Japan, the first time, I think it's in a decade, that they had a public opinion on nuclear where it was above 50%. And they're starting to turn back the reactors online because people need energy. The Philippines have included nuclear energy in their national energy plan. Indonesia has included it in their national energy plan. And then also we've seen advocates that I've worked with in the past in Denmark become political advisors to political parties because they have taken up that space of being a nuclear advocate. So abroad, we're seeing that you need a lot of energy, you need a lot of baseload clean energy. Renewables can't do it all. We all know this, right? And I want power 24/7. And like Isodop said, I want to come home and turn on the lights, and I don't want to reduce my consumption, what they're doing in California, because we almost have rolling blackouts every August or September. And I don't know if any of you are from Texas with the winter freeze. That's not acceptable in one of the richest countries in the world. So what I will say to finalize that, nuclear is looking real good right now. It's like vintage. It's like 90s style coming back. Eric?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking back to, this was October, we had the IAEA ministerial conference in Washington, D.C. And so, as part of this, all of the energy ministers from countries, there are over 100 countries represented there, got up and kind of gave their national address about their perspective on nuclear energy. And there were so many countries that you'd never expect. Like El Salvador gets up there and gives this like impassioned speech why we need to be putting more money into research so that countries that haven't had a chance to develop as much as like the U.S. Can have access to nuclear energy. Honduras, we just had a volunteer join our organization from Honduras a couple weeks ago, and there are so many countries in the world that could benefit from this, and they want it. And I think the U.S. really has sort of a moral responsibility, having invented nuclear energy here with Chicago Pile 1. I mean, come on. And really proven it and come up with patents for peace and all that. We have a responsibility to help share that technology with the world, and be able to build it on time and on budget. Otherwise, if we don't step it up, we see what happens, right? I just saw the other day, Pakistan inked a deal with China for a $4.8 billion reactor deal. Turkey's working with the Russians. If we're not ready to deliver, then these countries will work with China and Russia, and that doesn't put us in a very good place from a national security standpoint. And we need to be leaders here. So you guys are all part of that, obviously. So let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I think my friends captured it best, but it's a really good feeling. Even yesterday, as we all walked down the sidewalk in our beautiful purple shirts, it's like nuclear energy is clean. And to even say that in a very confident way among people that are willing to listen, it's really empowering. And so, I know the term nuclear revival has come up quite a bit, but it's now is as good a time as any to talk about it. And because we are at the policy landscape, especially in the U.S., where people are listening, and policymakers are listening. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right, let's cover two of the most common questions that nuclear advocates get asked. And the first being probably the most common question. What about the waste? How do you address this question?
That's actually my favorite question because when I started learning about nuclear energy, my biggest thing, so I used to be vegan. I studied at the University of Santa Cruz. I was subscribed to the ideology of small is beautiful. We needed to use less. And then when I started to look into nuclear, I was like, sold. It's my home. And you can use energy for so many different applications, as we mentioned, like desalination, hydrogen, or other, let's say, district heating. But my main caveat was the waste. And for me, I needed to go see it. And I know not everybody can go see nuclear waste, but I will say I'm not an engineer. I'm outside the industry and nobody knows what the heck it looks like. If you ask people to draw it, they don't know if it has water in it, if it's solid. So this is me at the Cobra National Repository of Waste of the Netherlands. And here they had all the way from low to high level waste. And on the photo on the left, that's high level waste. You could lay on the floor. It's a little warm. And I know people here know what nuclear waste is, but my response to what about the waste is nuclear waste is the best kind of waste. And of course, because over 90% of it can be reprocessed if you'd like to do that, like France or Japan, or you could, it's so energy dense that if you wanted to get your life's energy from nuclear, as we all know, it could fit in the size of a Coke can. So for me, I had to go see it, see what the big hoopla was about it. And I will say it's extremely boring, in my opinion. I went to, so that's at Netherlands, if we could show the next slide. Yeah, so this is at Cabo Verde. That was the first nuclear plant tour that I ever did. And that was my specific request. Can I see the waste? Why is everybody so scared about it? It's going to be toxic forever, millions of years. And then you go there and you go to these concrete little cans and they're just sitting on site and there's no water in it and they're being passively cooled. And I got to hug one. I got to touch it. So nuclear waste should be one of the chief selling points of nuclear. But I will say that it sounds really scary to those that don't even know how energy is produced, what a nuclear plant looks like. There's just not that level of education, especially among my friends and family, especially those in California. I didn't even know we had a nuclear plant. So what I will say is nuclear waste is great. We know what to do with it. We know how to keep it safe. If you want to leave it on site, great. If you want to bury it, you can do that, or you could reprocess it. There's toxic chemicals that are forever toxic that we deal with in our day-to-day lives around the country. There's repositories for those, but we don't talk about it. So I would encourage you to not be scared of this question, and get really excited. And when I say nuclear waste is the best kind of waste, people are instantly thrown off guard. And that's the time when you can share all the facts that you want, or even show pictures. Pictures are very effective. So I have this baby on my phone and I get to show everybody, this is the waste that we're scared of. And people leave a little bit more curious and a little less scared.
Yeah.
Here.
I was so inspired by Paris's photo that I was like, man, a bucket list item. And just shout out to folks at Entergy, Waterford 3 in particular, Elizabeth Smith, Spencer Johnson in here, hooked me up with the tour about a month ago now, where I also got to join the club of spent field cask huggers, I guess. And I brought my Geiger counter along, and put it to the most radioactive spot I could find, which was like this air intake on the bottom. And it was like something like 15, 16 microsieverts per hour. I was thinking to myself, I think that's less than this uranium glass plate that I had. And it is. The plate's like 20. So the most radioactive part I could find on that is less radioactive than a piece of vintage VSD ware. I love that. And I think it really underscores the importance of giving people really concrete examples that they can visualize, like a photo, because then, they can attach it to something they can understand. Nuclear waste is not going anywhere. It's warm. It's huggable. It hasn't hurt anyone in human history. And yeah, it's, of course, it is, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it is also important to acknowledge that people's, misgivings about nuclear waste are legitimately held, and that they are not stupid for thinking that nuclear waste is dangerous and leaking and getting everywhere and hurting people, because that is the narrative that's been put out there, and it's not that person's fault that they thought that. That's really important, to get anybody to kind of change their mind and listen to what you have to say. They have to feel heard first.
Second most common question, what about all the nuclear accidents? So Isabel kind of touched on this. Any kind of media coverage seems to be negative media coverage, when there's all these good things about nuclear out there that don't get reported on. So what is the best way to address this question here?
I think it's just like asking, like, I'm curious, like, which ones come to mind, and what have you heard? It's starting with that to see sort of what you're working with. If it's somebody, I watched Chernobyl on HBO, something like that, then you know where to start from. I think after you have that initial point of engagement, like, yeah, I'm listening to you, I actually do value your perspective on this, then at some point you can work in the very persuasive facts from, like, all world data is a great chart, shows the deaths per terawatt hour, and talk about, this is a lot like flying versus driving, right? And people constantly nervous anytime a plane is landing, and it seems like, oh man, we're really hitting the ground hard, or is really slamming on the brakes, or even just a bit of turbulence. People get nervous, but statistically, if you made it to the airport in your Uber, like, you're good to go. That was by far the most dangerous thing. And in the same way, we always forget about the many deaths from fossil fuel pollution, from coal particulates in particular. We don't think about that kind of stuff. Nuclear kind of looms as this uniquely dangerous thing, and the data just doesn't support it. And we have those facts now, and people will listen to them if they feel heard. So I guess with that, I would say that.
Right. All right, now, so what's your best tip for interacting with people who are apprehensive about nuclear? This is somebody who's not coming up to you angry about it. This is somebody who might have valid concerns based on their experience, and they're just a little nervous. How do you help them with that?
Yeah, I really appreciate what Eric just mentioned of seeing where they're at and their perspective. So even the opening of, so why do you feel that way? Or, what do you think? Even opening the door, what do you think about energy? I feel like energy at times is something that we can't quite comprehend. I mean, energy is not even in my background. I'm just really passionate about it and talking about it. And I think even listening to Isotope and so many wonderful speakers here, I'm learning as I do as well. And so I never approach a conversation that I have all of the answers. And so I think when I'm hearing, someone's a bit hesitant, they're talking about if it's the waste or the accidents, I like to bring it back to a commonality. So what is it that we both as human beings care about? And I know this is a bit generic, but people can agree on something, whether that be, okay, I like the economy. Cool. I like the economy too. Like, let's talk about what the nuclear energy industry contributes to our economy. You want to talk about safety? Awesome. I have that too. Oh, you like grid reliability? 24/7 energy. Let's talk about it. Security is a huge topic right now. and everyone's focused on energy security. Well, what does that look like in practice? What tools do we have to get us there? And even innovation. I mean, I've seen the dog or the Spot. Is it Spot? I might be getting that wrong. Thank you. Watching videos of the technology that's happening right now is amazing. I mean, that's what I do with my one eye open. I don't really go to Twitter first thing, but I'm looking at these videos. I'm like, these are actual people that are driving technology that's changing the way that we think about the energy around us. And so I always try to find that common link, and I try to build a conversation on, okay, maybe we don't agree on everything, but what is it that we do, and how can I manage to add nuclear energy to the mix so that someone's walking away from that thinking, I'm curious about that. I'm going to go look up resources. I'm going to go talk to my neighbor about it. I'm going to find an organization that I can learn more. So I always try to find that human element, because at the end of the day, we're all just talking to one another.
I'm wondering, there's a slide earlier. I'm wondering if the folks in the back can bring it up. It's sort of, they did a bunch of polling that kind of looked at some of the more persuasive arguments. But that's a good one too. I'll talk about that for a second. So, they asked, it's like 13,000 people globally, about 4,000 in the US, what the preferred messengers for this message about nuclear power, might be. And environmental organizations was up there. Number 2, this might be a little counterintuitive, nuclear industry representatives. I actually, I was talking to somebody, a communications person in the industry, and he told me, he's like, look, the last people anybody wants to hear from about nuclear is the industry. And I was like, I respectfully disagree. Like, you guys have a really important role to play, because like, if you aren't standing up for this technology, talking about the benefits of it, like, how can you expect others to? It seems like, you got something to hide or something like that. Anyway, there's some polling that backs up that you guys are really trusted messengers on this. You have the technical training, that kind of stuff. This was the other one I was thinking of. So preferred narratives gives us some insights here. Energy independence, surprisingly, still a pretty big one. A little bit more popular globally. You see that yellow bar than in the US. But clean innovation, just mentioned climate goals, opportunity and prosperity. Yeah, just the idea we've got this power source that doesn't make any pollution, no air pollution, such a small amount of raw material, and we don't have to be dependent on other countries. We shouldn't have to be, I should say. Russia enrichment capabilities notwithstanding. But yeah, these are some clues, I guess, on what folks care about from polling and learn from. This just came out like a month ago from Third Way and ClearPath and a couple others. So some good insights in that study. I recommend it for folks. Yeah.
Excellent insights. Hopefully you all took a few notes on what people are going to respond to.
Okay.
Next question. So I think so far maybe you're getting the impression that being a nuclear advocate is all sunshine and rainbows, and it can actually be difficult. So Paris, what's the hardest part of being an advocate?
When I first started out, I was looking at all the original environmental groups. Like, I had applied to Sierra Club, the NRDC, Earth Justice. I was planning on working with them because I was like, that's the typical environmental organization, and that will make me proud as an environmentalist from UC Santa Cruz. And then when I started advocating for nuclear, nobody else was doing it, or there were people that I didn't necessarily vibe with. I just thought it was a very eclectic group. It was very small. And so it was hard being the only person in the room talking about nuclear energy. And I was like, am I crazy? Why aren't you guys getting on board? And I think there was a stage of a little bit of anger and frustration with people. 52% of our zero carbon energy in the United States comes from nuclear energy, and I didn't even know that. I felt a little bit betrayed, in my education system, that I didn't even know that nuclear was such a big part. So being an advocate can be lonely sometimes, and I think finding a group and finding others that are willing to do some actions outside of, family conversations or friends conversations. And I think this past 2 years working on the Diablo Canyon campaign to save our last nuclear plant, as Izzy said, it was a bit bleak for, I want to say, like a whole year. We still had weekly meetings and nothing was really happening. But when the moment came when Governor Newsom, Daddy Newsom was like, we're going to have blackouts, energy independence and energy reliability was the thing that changed his mind, not climate, which made me a little sad. But all that to say, we were there at the right time to capitalize on that moment. So it was lonely. It gets a little bit better. I think a lot of more people are talking about nuclear, and are excited about it. It's like this new thing. I don't know how you guys feel. Has anybody in the crowd ever felt, ashamed to say that you've worked in the industry? No. Great. Okay. Well, German nuclear workers will sometimes lie to their friends and say that they don't work there because they were so ashamed and scared of what the other person was going to think.
Maybe they're ashamed to say that they were ashamed. Next level. Yeah, I know there's got to be some people in here where people are like, so what do you do? And you're like, I'm an engineer. You just like leave it at that. I don't want to open up a whole can of worms right now. I don't know what this person's going to think if I say nuclear. So let's just say engineer and be done with it. I get that. It can feel exhausting sometimes to like, I feel like I have to have a full conversation about this. But yeah, that's one of the hardest parts too. But sorry.
No, that's okay. I would sometimes say I'm a clean energy advocate, and then they'd be like, "Oh yeah, solar and wind." I'm like, "No, nuclear energy," and then just not want to talk about it because it usually goes into a big thing. It's like, do I have to talk about accidents or waste?
Yeah. But
now people are starting to hear more about it, and they might be interested.
Yeah. I run an environmental nonprofit. And I just like feel horrible that I don't get more details. Like, that's an opportunity. But thankfully, I don't like succumb to that sort of urge to be like, too tired right now. I don't want to talk about this on the plane with this random person. I need to take a nap.
So it happens to the best of us.
Yes.
So it's okay. You don't have to talk about nuclear energy every waking minute. All right. When we return home after this conference, what's the first thing we should do to start becoming an advocate? Allison, you can start.
Yeah, Christy, you mentioned rainbows and sunshine. I am one of those advocates. I'm like, just talk, like have a good time. But no, I think I view advocacy in a version of tiers. So we say tier 1 is you're here, great. You're connecting with partner organizations. You're utilizing social media. You're thinking about how to get more involved in NAYGN or similar organizations. And that is in a form of community organizing. So then we can move into tier 2 and say, how can we rally other people to be a part of this? And that's more of like the community organizing, but expanding and engaging. And I flashed a few images here. Kaylee Cunningham, that is someone that is a resource, and she's very willing to talk and share resources on TikTok, which is a new channel that we're slowly but surely expanding into. And I think that having those resources, that's more the step 1. Step 2, it's like, okay, I want to now tell my story. I want to bring in my community and figure out why nuclear energy is a part of the equation. Because advocacy is inherently personal. It's something that you should care about because it's yours. It's yours to share and to talk about. And so even having testimonials, people are so willing to share why. And I know we talked about the importance of that piece of it, and putting that on social media or just sending that, in any kind of organizations you're in by email and saying, I kind of wanted to talk about this today. And then, tier 3, thinking of that mobilization piece. So that's more of the contacting your policymakers, drafting letters to the editor to put in your local paper. This is just an example of a Nuclear Matters action form where say there's something happening, and this is a bit U.S. focused, but say there's something happening in a state. And we're like, okay, we really want to express our opinion about this policy. I mean, you can fill out, a pre-drafted form, simple as entering your contact information, and a form goes to your legislator. And I will never believe I received an email back once from my DC, we are not a state, unfortunately, but our policymaker, was like, yeah, thanks for sharing your opinion on nuclear energy. And I was like, did this person just respond to me? It's very cool to have that. I might frame it, put it on my fridge. But all to say that these are like the tiers of advocacy, and that begins, I mean, it began yesterday, it began a year ago. Your journeys are all going to look a bit different. It's how you show up in your workplace, in your communities, and your organizations. And I think as long as you can keep that going and keep talking about it, I know here I am talking about it. I get the irony of that all, but I think that that is a key part of advocacy, because the more that you make it about your journey, you're inspiring other people to then share theirs.
Eric, anything to add?
Yeah, I think even before you get home from the conference, a good thing to start. I know a lot of folks came here with some coworkers. Even not, maybe it's some people from the same fleet or the same state, something like that. But the first step should always be to find your team and get a group of people together. You could maybe call it a community of practice or something like that, where you got your accountability buddies, and you can meet on a regular basis to discuss what can be done and make a plan for various outreach activities, what you want to focus on, whether it's some state legislation or getting more educational resources out there, or many of the awesome initiatives that NAYGN is working on, in addition to Stand Up for Nuclear, host a stand-up event, or do something with Generation Atomic, or ask for advice on what to do. But the first step really should be find that group of people that you are excited to hang out with on a regular basis and talk about how to move nuclear forward, because they're gonna keep you going, and it won't feel so lonely as it can.
Can I add to that?
Yep.
Just a quick thing. Yeah. If you are in a state and maybe you don't know where to find your community or don't know anybody else, talk to Eric and I, and we can find some people that are in your area. That's how Stand Up has grown to 32 different countries. One person will come to us, we're like, can we do something? And I'm like, okay, let me search our database. Let me find some people on social media. And it's led to 9 new pro-nuclear organizations around the world in the last 3 years. So it could be one person, 2 people. So I know it may seem bleak and small, but there's definitely people we can put you in contact with. So you can just message Eric or I.
Yep. All right. One last question before we start our activity, and we all get to practice being advocates. What is your favorite fact that shows how great nuclear is? It's really helpful with conversations if you have one go-to thing that you can say and rely on when you're talking with people. Paris, you want to start?
For me, it's that nuclear energy is the second largest source of clean energy in the world. I think many people don't know that, and it's right behind hydro, and solar and wind are not the largest ones. So that's my favorite.
Nuclear energy is reliable because it operates 24/7.
It's hard to pick just one. But one I do like to talk about is the energy density. It's something really concrete people can wrap their minds up around. So I know we've probably all heard the uranium pellet, same as a ton of coal, as however many gallons of oil, 17,000 cubic feet of natural gas. Did some math the other day. It's also, if you're going to store the energy that one uranium pellet can produce in lithium ion batteries, be the size of a shipping container. So there's another one for you.
All right. Thank you all.